Hello and welcome to another episode of Football Corner Pod, wherein we talk about all things football. I'm Hari Keshav, and today we have with us, as always, my trusted friend and co-founder of the channel,
Hey, hi,
Amok. Hey,
Hari.
Amok. Today we have with us Ved, a truly multi-talented force in the world of sports. After completing his master's in sports management from the esteemed Loughborough University, Ved gained invaluable experience working with Michael Wisher team support, wherein he had great experience working with iconic clubs like Nottingham Forest and Derby County. Today, he leverages all that expertise in sales and sponsorships for major cricket tournaments worldwide while also working with the Indian Super League. Please join us in welcoming Ved to the podcast.
Hi,
Hello,
hi,
Ved.
everyone. Nice to meet you, Hari. Nice to meet you, Amok.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Ved, and carving some time off your extremely busy schedule. It's very interesting because we always talk about football from a club perspective, but this is the first time we are talking about the business perspective of sports. So we really wanted to have you here, and it's an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. For our viewers, Ved, could you give us a brief introduction on your earliest footballing memories and your journey into making sports a career, because that is all most of us dream of.
Thank you, first of all, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Something I love doing as well. Earliest memory of football would probably just be watching Chelsea matches with my cousin. I won't lie and say I was impressed by this player or that player. The only reason I started supporting Chelsea is because I knew other people who was supporting Chelsea when I was about 6 or 7. This was during the Mourinho era. I was too young and I started following, think a little more towards the Ancelotti era, and then 2011, 2012 is where I started watching every game, following, staying up at nights, fighting with parents to stay up when we have school. And I played cricket all my life. I played football growing up. I play in goals. I played for school growing up, and football's always been my favorite sport to watch and follow. So that led me to pursuing my sport management, going to the UK and studying there, and also being a part of the footballing ecosystem there. And now back to India, and hopefully can make some moves in football in India as well.
Thank you so much, Ved, for that brilliant introduction. In today's episode, we shall discuss briefly regarding Ved's time working with Forest and Derby County, his experience then coming back to India working with ISL clubs. But then we are also going to talk a lot about the grassroots and academy of football in the UK, not just from a talent perspective, but from a business perspective, both in the UK and India, just to see what are the commonalities and what are the differences or how big the gap is. And all of that, Ved is going to provide his insights in this podcast. So please strap in and let's dive into the episode. With your time at Forest and Derby County, Nottingham Forest have been absolutely flying this season, and the fans are a huge part of it. I don't know if you were ever there at City Ground. So, how was that experience, the atmosphere, being at a Premier League club, and how would you describe
I
that?
think it was wonderful. So back to the city ground, Nottingham was not very far from Loughborough. So as students, we were looking for student jobs and working in sport. Nothing better came across other than working for at Forest, at Derby, Arsenal, etc. So I started off working in the retail spaces as a student. Would work with retail crowd in terms of food and beverage and things like that, and moved into hospitality because it was a little better. You work longer hours and you could experience a little more of the club and understand how it was and how hospitality in football works. I think it was a great experience. I started working at the City Ground when Forest won the championship, the year they got promoted. There is a history that I have with that. So every game that I worked at the City Ground, Forest never lost a game. So to
Oh,
not
okay.
break that jinx, me and my friends went down all the way to Wembley to watch the championship final as well. We worked and watched at the championship final. We saw them beating Huddersfield and getting promoted to the Premier League. Funnily enough, the first loss that I saw at the City Ground was Forest losing to Spurs in the Premier League when they got promoted. A bittersweet feeling for me. So it was always good, and I from there I moved on to working at Nottingham Forest Academy. I was able to interact with a lot of the kids, under nines, under 13s, under 16s, and then the senior team players as well at the academy. So I worked quite a bit at the academy. I'd be there 3, 4 times a week. So I'd see what's going on. I would interact a lot with the coaches and management and ask them a lot of questions. So that was my journey. I got to work a lot at Derby as well. This was when Wayne Rooney was Derby manager. They were struggling with administration. They went down, they bounced up. Very old football club, lot of pride and a lot of fan support and passion. So it was great working at both the clubs. I'll obviously delve into the business matters of it as we speak on the podcast.
You mentioned Pride at Derby County. Obviously, the
Right.
stadium itself is called Pride Park. But how big of that gulf was it, Ved? Because one club is now just getting promoted to the Premier League, and another club, which was a Premier League club as well, in the Championship, facing administration, going into League One. So, how much of a gulf was it working with these two clubs in terms of the business aspect, working in different tiers of the English
Yeah,
pyramid?
definitely. There's a massive dip and massive comparison. Forest are obviously Derby's rivals, so very close to each other. So there was a lot of that inbuilt amongst the fans as well. So you hear a lot, you learn a lot. See, I built an affinity towards both clubs, little closer to Forest. Although I'm a Chelsea fan, I'll never support any other club. It's always close to my heart because you've seen it, you've been there all this time. In terms of the business aspect of it, a massive difference. So when you're a championship club and when you're a League One club, the kind of revenue you're generating also changes. So the cost of season tickets, the cost of tickets for games also reduces, and the number of fans coming into the stadium reduces in the lower leagues of the pyramids of English football. Forest could service full hospitality at the championship. They could sell out their hospitality stands. They could serve food and beverage. And as they moved into the Premier League, they actually built and customized their stadiums. They built in more hospitality stands, boxes. So they were able to do that with additional revenue coming in. Whereas at Derby, the hospitality which we were at wasn't even serving food. They were only able to serve beverage because economically it wasn't working out. They weren't able to service the food aspect of it, not in all the stands, but certain hospitality stands of Derby. So that was a massive difference. And you could see the fluctuations in crowds, the emotions. Like working at Forest was a completely different emotion than working at Derby. And because the employees are so passionate about the clubs as well, your work atmosphere also changes based on how the club is playing and how the fans are around, how reactive they are, and alcohol is a big part of the game, so that has an influence as well in terms of how the fans are with you. So obviously, very big differences. But I was lucky enough to work at such passionate clubs.
Some amazing insights. When we talk about football, we always talk about the big clubs, the clubs in the Premier League, but the actual passion, the actual heart of football is, I've always heard that it's in the lower tiers of the English pyramid when there is not much to go for. It's almost like the crowd almost sucks the ball into the net. So it must have been an amazing experience for you to experience not just Premier League football, but also a different tier of football. But coming back to your experience in the UK and then coming back to India, now you are working with deals and sponsorships for the Indian Super League. So, massive difference in both the leagues in terms of revenue, in terms of quality, in terms of media attention and everything. Do you think that because you work there, things are much more easier for you, or it's much more difficult here in India to get the ball rolling because there's not many eyes on football as much as there is in cricket?
I think difficult would not be the word I would use. It's very different. It is difficult in terms of and attracting revenue. So everything is driven by results. So if the viewership is not as high, the sponsors coming in also reduces. But so my company ITW Consulting and I, we worked on the Nandini deal, which is our local Karnataka brand, and they're expanding pan India. So it was a great space for them to be present because there are 13 teams in the ISL across various cities, so it really covers multiple touch points. But in terms of media value, it just doesn't meet cricket or some of the other sports like a kabaddi or a hockey might as of now. I think revenue streams are extremely difficult. Food and beverage doesn't generate as much revenue as a football club would do because I think the difference is in a football club in the UK, all the food and beverage revenue is being generated and going straight to the club. Here, external food vendors are being called. They pay a licensing fee or they pay a fee to be a part of the entire season and put up a stall. I don't know if there is a revenue share model amongst these stalls, but most of the revenue goes to individual entities or individual brands in terms of the ones who are setting up food stalls. So I think that is a big miss. India's own reasons, India's own regulations and laws, alcohol is not allowed at the stadium, and that's a big revenue stream in terms of margins also in the UK. So it's a big part of the football culture. So that is cutting off revenue streams, and it's also reducing alcohol sponsors and alcohol surrogate brands to come on board because there is no direct correlation or understanding between brands, and there's no that sort of synergy isn't there even with ASL as it used to
Mhm.
be earlier. I think Vivo and Reliance are
Okay.
trying their best to keep the league afloat. It is a trying period for the league, and I think a lot of work needs to be done through grassroots and even at the club level for it to really see a big change and improvement and even come close to what we see in Europe.
There's some very salient points that you made. You mentioned Reliance, and there's obviously other companies who are trying to bring football to the masses and doing a lot in terms of elevating the status of football. But do you think now, with these many years of ISL and the global appeal for football, and also how much football crazy India is as a whole, do you think big companies are more receptive to doing sponsorship deals for ISL, or do you still think that all of the big sponsors are still very much focused on cricket as a whole? At least, has there been a changing of the torch or change of perception?
I think the perception is cricket is king and India will always be there. The big sponsors will always look
Mhm.
at cricket as the medium to go to. With how it is different here is there are two types of sponsorships. Either you become a sponsor of the league or you become a sponsor of the
Hmm.
team. Although both have become
Correct.
increasingly difficult, I see that teams have more sponsors than the league itself. Probably because your local sponsors cater more to the team than the central league, you look for a more global or a multinational brand to be a part of the league itself because they don't cater to a single team. It's also, I think, a little more reasonable to be a partner with the team and hits the target audiences in those geographies. So, in terms of teams getting sponsors, it's still slightly better, especially for some of the more popular teams or metropolitan teams, whether it's your Bangalore or
Correct.
Kerala, Chennai, and Mohan Bagan does well. But someone like a Mohammedan who's just come up might find little
Yeah.
more challenging, and the league in itself
Hmm.
finds it a little more challenging because they need that pan India brand. It's a tough space to be in, the central sponsor, but it's also a great space to be in because you're not showing bias towards a single team. You're supporting football in India, and you're seen across all matches across all 13 teams. So it's a bit of both. There's a mixture of positive and negative.
We talked about the sponsorship side of it, but I also know that there are certain bigger teams who are involved in the ISL. There's been some collaboration with Manchester City, with Mumbai FC, and then can you share some insights as to how the sister clubs, as they are called, or being within the group of clubs that we have so become accustomed to, has this been helping these teams to move forward or improve their geographical footprint in terms of the people that are watching the league, or has that helped the club in terms of revenue, in terms of structure, anything at all? Has it really helped these clubs
I've
move
not
forward?
seen much of that side of the ISL, to be honest. But from the top of my head, being around football and seeing and having friends who have played, you always know that in the cases of partnerships like this, it'll always help grassroots football because you have international here sharing their insights. There is always a set standard of how to run a club when a massive club comes in, so you don't waver that sense, and a club has guidance or direction towards a certain goal or a certain metric that they have to follow for sure. And I think in terms of comparison, the best comparison I can give you is Bengaluru FC being owned by JSW. So you can see an overlap
Hmm.
between Delhi Capitals and Bengaluru FC being owned by the same owners, and also JSW play a big role in terms of grassroots sport in India. They do a lot for developmental athletes across all sports. They do a lot for the Indian Olympics as well. So I think that is setting a different standard that's creating expectations for sport in India that is definitely improving the quality of sport and football in India. So I think JSW, the way they run Bengaluru FC is also very different. It feels like a more premium club. It feels a little better. It also feels good to be associated with a club like Bangalore FC. So that is the parallel I can draw here.
Some wonderful insights, and also a wonderful segue into what we are going to talk about next, which is grassroots and academy football. During your time in the UK with Nottingham Forest and Derby, which are some of the famed football clubs, have you had the chance to see up close and personal how the grassroots and academy football at these clubs are set up, and how would you compare the two? Because considering one was in the ascendancy and one was going down in the football pyramid at
Yeah.
that time. And then just an extension to that question is how big the gulf is for the academies and grassroots football in the UK versus what we have in India.
I think, yeah, there is a massive gap there. I've not worked as closely with Derby County as I've worked with Forest. I've worked a lot at the Nottingham Forest Academy. It was actually amazing to see what they do with football and academies in the UK. It is a holistic approach that they take. Nottingham Forest take care of the schooling of the kids right from their 7, 8, 9, 10 up till their senior years. They ensure that once they graduate, if they don't make it as a footballer, sometimes players do lose contracts. They might not get jobs in sport, but a lot of them have the eligibility or understand that they can work in sport and still earn a decent living because of minimum wage and also dignity of labor, respect given, two different kind of jobs. So they become coaches for the under 9s, under 13s, and do well for themselves. They complete their certifications. So there is scope to also work at the lower levels of football, which I do not see in India. You really have to be at the top if you have to sustain a sport. But I think it is not an apple to apple comparison. So you cannot look at it the same way. India has its own problems, UK has its own problems. India really has to learn in terms of developing kids from the grassroots stage. They have home and away matches at the age of 9, 11, 12, 13. They travel to different cities. There's so much to learn when you travel as a team. You share spaces. All their nutrition and diet is taken care of. So that's another headache taken off the parents' head financially, and also the effort that's put in. So their meals are taken care of and it's healthy living. Everything is taken care of and they're treated as professional adult footballers, which I feel like India is trying. We have seen youth academies here, but to sustain, I think the revenue also has to increase. So it's a big challenge. You have to really change the entire dynamic top to bottom in that funnel. Only then will we be able to see a change at grassroots. It's not something that you do for 1 year, 2 year. You have to develop, and that's only when you'll see it. Like a classic example would be Brennan Johnson. His dad played prior to him. He came through the academy, had a breakout season at Nottingham Forest, got them promoted, and he earned himself a big move to Tottenham Hotspur. Football is looked at in a sense where we only see the big money and the big transfers like your Jack Grealishes or your Jude Bellinghams, but nobody understands that the ones who have come out of the academy who are doing decently well enough are also earning extremely well, living good lives, and are also professional footballers for their country, for their clubs. With India, I think there's a big gap that needs to be bridged. I think that has to come from administration, management, and funding has to be put in right from your government level. And I think privatization is really important here because football clubs in the UK are private, so it's all dependent on these private entities to look after their players. So that is how the difference is top of my head.
Extremely interesting insights, because also considering now with PSR being a huge player in the background, more and more these big teams are looking at their own academies to help fund this difficult financial situation that they could be in. And also, if done well, it could be very
Yeah.
lucrative for them as well, right? Because it's pure profit in the end. So I only hope that in the UK that the academies prosper, but also hopefully some of these blueprints are taken back home in India. And I think, as you rightly said, if in India, if we could develop, we could provide scholarships to the kids who are playing age category footballs, and also nutrition, if it is taken care of, I would say there's a lot more of players in these categories. Because if you remember, a couple of days ago, the Indian national coach, he came and said that the under 11, under 13, and under 15 football players in India, they have better talent in India than in Spain, which was a huge statement to come and say. But then he did not have a vision, or he did not have a prediction as to whether we can bring these kids into the national team, which is a huge problem. But what is your vision, now that you've seen what is happening in the UK, what the problems in India are? What is your vision for grassroots and academy football in India? And what do you think is realistically achievable in
Hmm.
the next, let's say, short term, 3 to 5 years?
I think long and short perspective, I think one thing we're really lacking is exposure. We're not playing in different conditions. We're not going to European countries, weather, grounds, kind of oppositions, kind of styles of play that you play against really molds you as a footballer. Otherwise, you become very one dimensional, and that's reflecting in our national team as well. And because our FIFA coefficient ranking is quite awful, we're not able to send players to the big leagues in Europe. They're not able to play, even if individually they're gifted, individually they're good. It's affecting through its own legalities or rules and regulations affecting them from playing in these kind of tournaments. But I feel like Asia in itself has such a big footballing scope or footballing whatever universe. The Middle East is somewhere where you can send young boys, you can send them to East Asia, Southeast Asia, Thailand, Japan, South Korea to learn. It's not as expensive as going to Europe. And also, this is still a stretch in terms of exposure and things like that. Back really down to your grassroots, I think equipment, football equipment is not like cricket where you have to invest in a bat, pads, helmet. It's basic. It's your shin pads, your stockings, your cleats, your shoes, your studs, basically. If that is taken care of, your jerseys are taken care of. Accommodation is something that can still be worked out even if it's dormitories. And meals, I think nutritious meals, if they are taken care of, especially for a lot of the players who come from rural backgrounds or they don't come from very privileged households, it's a big incentive for them to keep playing. Otherwise, you can see players falling off at 13, 14 because they have other needs to take care of. They take care of families, they have to take care of their own personal well-being. Without that, football is just a sport to everyone. You look at it from a wider angle,
True.
it is a business, it is something we all love, but unless you have food in your belly and a roof over your head, you're not going to be able to do something else. So I think these basic needs, if they're taken care of, and also incentivize the players to play, if you can monetize and pay them even basic salaries or incentives, it'll also encourage parents to see that there is a scope for football in India. Because it's not like cricket where you go and play for one national team. Now I know that the IPL is there, but that is also an option system where you have to be good enough to get picked. But football, you can literally go through academies and become a professional footballer in India through clubs. It's not just the 11 or 15 of the national team who are going to be earning well. So you really have to change that dynamic, and the government really has to come up with a vision and a 10-year, 15-year plan, and set yourself aside, compare yourself to another country as to where they are right now, and work towards that goal, I feel. So I think exposure and travel and taking care of these basic needs, I think starting at the basics will really reflect in terms of performances even in the near future.
Brilliant. I really hope someone who is there in the AIFF or someone who is something big in football in India is looking at this, because I'm sure everybody knows what the blueprint is, but in order to operationalize it, it takes not much. It just takes, as you said, if we need to get Indian football to the next level, or all the three things that you said, with food in your belly, a roof over your shed, and more importantly, a dream to take Indian football
Okay,
forward.
and
So that
sorry, I
is
missed out on another pointer. I think one more thing that really needs to improve are the facilities, ground facilities, and venues in India. Because if you are going for a cricket match and you're going for a football match, and you're a neutral, you don't support any club, you will pick a cricket match just because you'll go and find a chair that is more suitable, and or you will be able to find easier access, relatively cleaner stadiums, and also better facilities. It's about making the experience enjoyable. Football and other sports are not only for fans who watch it for the sport. People want recreation in India, so people do it just for the fun of it. They don't need to necessarily like football to do it. It's a day out with their family, it's a day out with kids. If you can improve the quality of your hospitality, have hospitality access across football stadiums, improve the quality of grounds and venues, it'll really see a massive change. And people will, I think word of mouth is enough in terms of getting people to go for games, and that will naturally increase revenue and viewership. Once viewership goes up, goes up. That's the case with everything, I feel.
absolutely brilliant point again. The community feeling, creating that experience that the fans want to watch, because sometimes the football is not the greatest, the quality of football, but then if you create the sense of community, the sense of ownership, the sense of belongingness, also
Exactly.
improve the experience. Like some of the football that we've seen that Bengaluru FC is doing or Kerala Blasters are doing, wherein they are able to attract much of the crowd. And I also saw that Bengaluru FC are, I think, women in the stadium, it's absolutely free for them start of this year. So it's small things like these go a big way. And it was just brilliant talking to you with and opening our eyes to one, see what the issues are, but also dream how better it can be in the future.
Wanted to ask both of you a question about the retail side of football in India in terms of jerseys. You're wearing a Borussia Dortmund jacket. I'm wearing a Chelsea t-shirt. I'm sure Amog has jerseys stashed somewhere. Why is the demand for European jerseys so high? And why is there a lack of Indian football jerseys? I know people wear them, people buy them. Why is there such a lack in terms of us supporting our own local club? I myself don't have a Bengaluru FC jersey. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here, but I myself don't have it. And football retail and jersey and merchandising is such a big revenue stream for clubs. So what do you guys think on this front?
That's a really good question, Ved, because yeah, absolutely right. But it's just, I guess we are not, even though we come from these cities, we are not as much connected to the football that is coming from our own city, because we have started with seeing the best. We've started associating ourselves with, for example, me with Manchester United, wherein I am a boy in Mysore, associating myself in a city in Manchester, which I've never been to, which I've never seen, just because of the love, the brand of football, the viewership that you talked about, the experience of watching the team. And you guys, for example, have associated yourself with Chelsea, which is in London, being all the way back from India. So I guess that is what we have failed to do. The viewership, the reach, the penetration, and the feeling of, okay, this is from my hometown. Just a quick comparison also to cricket, for example, the amount of support the Royal Challengers Bengaluru has, and what they do in terms of making other people from India support Royal Challengers Bengaluru in terms of their social media activities, in terms of their campaigns, in terms of everything that they do on the environmental side, on the social side. Probably that is something that these football clubs can also take a leaf out of, in order for more people to support, and then for more people to help push through jerseys. But also, there is one other challenge that I see in India, which is people are not probably willing to pay for the true price of the jersey, but they would just rather pay for a fake version of the jersey, which is something, again, it's a huge problem, not just in football,
Across
but
all sports, yeah,
across
retail is facing that problem,
across.
yes. But I think
Yeah,
through
yeah. So to
expendable incomes and affinity towards jerseys, that should pick up. And I think Indian football teams should really pick up on terms of their merchandising and retail, really push it out there, put it into markets and
yeah.
put it in everyone's face across all the retail stores and across all touch points and across clothing stores in India, whoever the merchandising partners are. I think it'll be a, because revenue will always go to the club when it's jerseys. So I think that's somewhere we're really, that's a big gap that needs to be filled, and that's something we're really missing out on.
I do have one more question, Ved. As my day-to-day work is on analytics, so how do you compare Forest or Derby, Grassroots or scouting slash analytics, finding the talent to the ISL?
There will be scouts, obviously. We don't know to what extent. I know that the resources in the UK, a club like Forest and Derby, will probably be better. Although the owners are quite affluent here in India, they can afford it, but it's not a very adjustable resource, I feel, because something like an analytics in India is looked at as a very premium asset. In the UK, for clubs like Forest and Derby, it's basic, where laptops, Excel sheets, player movements, styles of play are analyzed from your under 9s, under 13s, under 15s. So it's being used extensively there. So it's inbuilt in the players to follow these patterns of play as they're growing up. If you could see through Pep Guardiola's time at Manchester City, the style of football of the Premier League has only changed so much just through the advent of a single team. Extremely tactical, that whole thing about Brexit ball, all of that is gone. I think India's catching up with international coaches coming in. We're learning more. I think you have to give it to the UK in the sense that football is being played there for over a century now at professional level. So within the last 10, 20, 30 years of professional football in India, we have probably lacked a little bit. We have to give it a lot more time and investment for us to get there, because they have that advantage of time over us. And hopefully, with the growth of football and it getting better, we will get there as well.
With AI coming in now, probably that ISL should take an advantage on that.
Yeah, they should. Because a lot of these turfs also, which we play for recreational sports, are installing cameras that are tracking your movement. You're able to analyze yourself that way. So if it can be done at such a basal level, I think it can be done at a higher professional league as well. And I think they must be doing it. We might not have been exposed to it. We might not have come across it. But if they are, touch wood, I hope it just gets better from here on.
Brilliant. That is all we have for this episode. Thank you so much, Ved, for joining us on the pod. As I always said, we've always talked about fans who've come in, talked about their clubs, talking about football, but we've never spoken about the business side of football. And for someone like you to come to the podcast and talk about your varied experience, not just in India, but in the UK as well, and to compare the two and point out the commonalities and the differences, it surely gives us and our viewers a wealth of knowledge for them to pick on. So thank you so much for joining us on
No,
the pod.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
So as always, please do like, share, and subscribe to our content on Football Corner Pod. Viewers, your love and support has been par excellence. Keep it coming, guys, and we will be coming back soon with another episode. So until then, take care, be safe, and be aware of any corners taken quickly.
Hopefully,
See you
Chelsea
guys.
win tonight.
Bye.
So let's go.
Let's go.
Absolutely.
All right.
What was that? KTFB
KTB
FFH.
FFH. Yes.
Brilliant. See
See
you
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.